Aunt May had died instead of Uncle Ben. And right off the bat, I like the cover. It's pretty good. It kind of gives away a little bit because we got Uncle Ben seemingly being arrested, right? His hands behind his back. He's being arrested by this cop. We got Aunt May dead. Spoiler, Uncle Ben did not kill Aunt May, okay? But we got Spider-Man looking over. Damn it, that's not what I wanted to do. Fuck me. Fuck me. All right, let's bring the screen back up. This is what I want to do. I want to change the page. All right, so in this is the first page. As you can see, it goes over. So it actually does the whole, we're going to go over the origin of Spider-Man and everything. So it says, so, like Spider-Man, right? He's like the total geek who gets bit by this radioactive spider. So off the jump, in the first narration box, it's not the Watcher. It's clear that this is not the Watcher talking, right? And he goes through the whole getting bit by the spider, getting spider powers. It says, just whatever, listen, because this is the good part, right? What he does. What does he do with these powers? After all these years of being pushed around by the in crowd, he goes and gets on TV, becomes this big star. So right there, right off the jump, they're already taking liberties with the Spider-Man story, right? Because clearly, if you're familiar with the Spider-Man story, the origin, he doesn't become a big star. He goes on TV and does this little, like, it's like the Tonight Show or whatever, right? I don't think it's explicitly the Tonight Show because, the rights or whatever, but it was basically goes on like a Tonight Show type show, puts on a performance, tries to cash a check, but hey, lo and behold, he can't cash a check because his name is in Spider-Man, right? The checks are written out to Spider-Man. And if my memory serves me correct, that happens after Aunt May's death, right? So the idea that he's already been on TV and he's famous, I don't think that holds up. I think all he did was the wrestling thing with his powers. But again, he didn't have the costume yet. He has the costume. Maybe he did go to TV. So he goes to TV, puts the costume on, and does the thing, right? But anyway, so there's the criminal. The criminal gets away. Spider-Man doesn't stop him. Criminal goes home, goes to rob Aunt May, robs her. And oh no, Uncle Ben dies. And that's what happens in the 616 universe, right? That's in the main Spider-Man universe. And they're kind of going over that. As you can see, this is from the actual origin of Spider-Man from Amazing Fantasy 15. So this is Spider-Man. Obviously, he doesn't reveal to the criminal that he's Peter Parker. He doesn't reveal that it was him. The criminal is knocked out. He says, the fugitive who ran past me, the one I didn't stop when I had the chance. Right? And again, in the original story, Spider-Man fails to stop a criminal. That criminal kills Uncle Ben, and that leads to his Spider-Man heroic origin. However, what people don't realize, what many people fail to realize about the origin of Spider-Man, is that Amazing Fantasy 15 is the first story of Spider-Man, tells this origin. The origin is slightly altered in Spider-Man number 1. Right? So in Spider-Man number 1, here's the origin of Spider-Man. It says, but while I was busy showing off, an armed burglar fired one fatal shot at Uncle Ben when he was surprised robbing our house. As soon as I learned what had happened, I sped through the city via my spider web, lusting for revenge. And I soon caught the killer and turned him over to the police. So in this version, they omit the part with it being the same criminal that passed him over. And they basically said that he was showing off, right? If he didn't show off, if he just went straight home, he would have caught the burglar. Uncle Ben wouldn't have died. He was showing off, therefore Uncle Ben died. So that's the slightly tweaked origin from Amazing Fantasy 15 to Amazing Spider-Man number 1, right? A lot of people don't realize it. A lot of people don't know that. They're just familiar with the combination, right? There's almost a combination of origins between the two when they retell it over and over, because obviously during the Spider-Man runs, they obviously reference the origin and stuff. And so they kind of combine the two origins into one complete origin. But here we go over it again. And this is where I really take issue with it, right? So he says, Now, Peter has not only caused the death of his uncle, but he got to take care of Aunt May, who's all alone in the world. And that's what we never think about when we talk about Spider-Man and what makes him a hero. It says, it was all those years of living with Aunt May that shaped the hero that Spider-Man would become. So according to this guy, so this is who's telling the story. It's not the watcher. It's this fat guy, if you're not watching the screen. It's a fat gentleman in a comic book store talking to another gentleman in a comic book store who's wearing a Ghost Rider shirt. So the guy in the watcher shirt is basically saying that Spider-Man is only Spider-Man because of Aunt May. Without Aunt May, Spider-Man would have never been the hero that he is. And that's where I take issue. I think the writer, this is Ed Brubaker, is the writer. I think he's really downplaying Spider-Man's childhood, his growing up, being taught lessons by Uncle Ben, Aunt May, being taken care of, the years and years prior to the spider bite, right? All the formative years of Peter Parker's life prior to being bit by the spider has changed and shaped him into the man he is, right? So I don't think living with Aunt May, while that certainly has played a part in how he's acted as Spider-Man and maybe, sneaking out of the house, not wanting Aunt May to know he's Spider-Man, keeping his identity hidden, stuff like that. I don't think that he would be any less of a hero or any less of a heroic person had Aunt May not been around. But this comic is the premise is, what if Aunt May died instead, right? So he says, what are you talking about, Stu? He says, I'm talking about what if Aunt May had been killed instead of Uncle Ben. And so in this version, this is obviously not the third page, but it's the third image. I can't show you every image, right? I'm not going to have Marvel come down my throat and kill me. But in this one, Uncle Ben, they basically say that in the original story, Uncle Ben had came downstairs because he had a sciatic injury, right? And, his sciatic nerve was acting up. So that's why he went downstairs. That's why the burglar shot him. In this world, in this universe, Uncle Ben's sciatic nerve was not acting up. So he did not go downstairs. Instead, Aunt May went downstairs, confronted the burglar. She got shot and killed. And so Uncle Ben blames himself. Peter blames himself, right? So Peter gets very mad. He's very upset by what happened. He tells Uncle Ben, it's my fault. And I'm going to go and be Spider-Man. I'm going to go catch this criminal. He says, that scum. He goes, yeah, I am, Uncle Ben. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but that scum killed Aunt May, and he's going to pay for it. So Peter's very upset. And what's weird is Uncle Ben knows who Spider-Man is. He sees the costume, and he immediately goes, you're Spider-Man. You're the Spider-Man. And again, I think we're taking liberties with how famous Spider-Man is. I don't think Aunt May at this point would have known. I don't think they watched the episode where he was on TV yet. So the idea that Spider-Man is famous is like a famous person prior to Uncle Ben, the shooting, the robbery, because I'm pretty sure that happens really early in the timeline of Spider-Man's career, right? Yeah. So he says, I'm going to find them, right? I'm going to get them. So the burglar is hiding in a house nearby in a warehouse. And I think right here, this line from one of the characters really describes what's going on in this story and why the story is written the way it is. So the one character goes, wait a second. Why is the killer in some nearby warehouse that Peter Parker knows has a secret, has a service tunnel? So the guy telling the story goes, because he has to be for the story to work. They're essentially, the writer, Ed Brubaker, is essentially telling you, hey, everything that I'm going to write, I'm doing it in order to make the story work. In order to tell the story that I am telling, I'm going to twist and change things that are fundamentally set in stone in order to tell the story I want, right? It doesn't matter that, it makes no sense that he's now in a closer warehouse. It doesn't matter that Peter's familiar with this warehouse and there's a secret service tunnel that only he knows about. I need that in order to tell this story. So we're going to put that in there, and that's the way it's going to be. And there's going to be a lot of moments like that in this story. So Peter goes, but Uncle Ben takes off after him. So apparently Uncle Ben also knows about this secret service tunnel that the police don't know about. The police know he's in this building, but apparently none of the police officers know there's a service tunnel. Uncle Ben sneaks around the police, gets in the service tunnel. Meanwhile, Peter, who's web slinging across the city, apparently he's so slow at web slinging that Uncle Ben is able to get to the building almost at the same time that Peter does. right? But now he has to walk up a couple flights of stairs. Uncle Ben's bad sciatic nerve is going to take him a while to get upstairs. So Peter's confronting the criminal. And he gets mad. He tells him, it's me. And the criminal backs up. And just as Peter's about to really unleash on the criminal, Uncle Ben makes it. He makes it all the way up the stairs, not huffing and puffing. Uncle Ben's apparently in really great shape. This old man ran all the way up. I think it's like 4 floors plus the basement, right? So it's like 5 floors of stairs. And he gets up there just in time to see Peter freaking this guy out and says, the killer's so freaked out by Spider-Man that he just scrambles backward and goes right out the window, just like in the movie. Says the other guy, and he goes, well, they got some things right. And so Peter doesn't kill the guy. The guy kills himself, right? And at this point, we got Peter, we got the criminal, they're in the building. And it says, the cops outside says, someone just threw him out that window. I want men up there now, okay? And this makes no sense because if you see the way that the guy backs up and falls out the window, right? The cops would have seen the guy just falling, like coming towards the window, backing out, falling out. They would have known that no one threw him, right? You could tell a difference between someone falling out a window and someone being tossed out a window, right? You'd think the cops who are watching outside looking would be like, hey, that guy just tripped and fell out that window versus that guy just threw, because he doesn't even slip. Like there's not even like he, in the movie, in Spider-Man, he like slips on a pipe or something, like falls out. In this one, he just kind of backs up and we don't see him slipping on a pipe or anything where like he would be airborne and sort of go through the window. So it might kind of look like someone tossed him, right? So then Uncle Ben goes to the window and says, Peter, hide. Get up in that shadow and don't make a sound. But it was, so Peter's freaking out, right? And apparently the cops get up there immediately. And now they're arresting Uncle Ben. And again, I tell you why. Peter is Spider-Man. Peter could have grabbed Uncle Ben. No one's seen them in the building. No one knows they were in the building. Peter could have grabbed Uncle Ben, took off, hit Uncle Ben in the rafters with him, said, shut up, Uncle Ben. We got to hide, right? The cops are coming. No, he just lets Uncle Ben get arrested. Again, no one sees, like the cops are there. Hands where we can see them, you're under arrest for murder, right? They don't know it's Uncle Ben yet. Like still, 2 cops there. Peter could have came down, attacked the cops, webbed them up in the face so they couldn't see Uncle Ben, and again, try to get him out. He just lets the cops arrest Uncle Ben. Because again, I guess they need the story to make sense, right? They need, in order to tell the story they're telling, they need Peter and Uncle Ben to just be really fucking retarded, right? This leads to, of course, Peter. He gets sent to a juvenile foster care system because he's got no family. He's got no his uncle and his Aunt May are now dead. She's dead. Uncle Ben's in jail. He's in the system. Apparently, in this universe, Aunt Anna, MJ's aunt, their neighbor who would take care of Peter in this instance, she's not friends with May, right? May doesn't have any friends. Peter's friends, Harry and all them, none of their families took Peter in. No one cares about Peter Parker in this universe. Peter has nobody, literally, right? Even Harry would have said, "Hey, Dad, Peter's Uncle Ben just got arrested and his Aunt May's dead, and you think you could help him out? Maybe set him up with an apartment with us, or have him come move in with us, or something, right?" Like none of his friends. Because he does have friends. Like, despite him being a huge nerd and everything, Peter's always had a couple of friends, right? So none of them take care of him. So he ends up in juvie. And, of course, Uncle Ben tells him basically, don't worry about it. Just live your life. And no more Spider-Man. No more of this Spider-Man business. And again, this is where I think they're taking liberties because apparently Spider-Man just disappears and the whole city wants to know why. Apparently, his one appearance on the fucking Tonight Show or whatever the fuck it was, right? That has made it like he's done no super heroics, he's helped nobody, he's saved nobody, he's not done nothing. There's been no actual Spider-Man activity up until this point, right? He's not a hero yet. Because Uncle Ben dies, and that's what makes him be a hero in this universe. Aunt May died. But apparently everyone wants to know who he is. Because again, in order for the story to make sense, all the newspapers have to be running the story that Spider-Man has disappeared. City's costume hero Spider-Man disappears without a trace. Again, this wouldn't make any sense because Spider-Man isn't Spider-Man yet. Uncle Ben dies very, very early in the Spider-Man mythos, right? And of course, because there's no Spider-Man, John Jameson, J. Jonah Jameson's son, dies. Spider-Man's not there to help him when he crash lands on Earth. And so he dies. And this pisses off Jameson. So again, they want to have a reason for Jameson to still be mad at Spider-Man. Jameson, J. Jonah Jameson, is mad at Spider-Man because John's death is being overshadowed by people wondering where Spider-Man is, which again makes no sense because Spider-Man wasn't a thing, right? He would have been like a blip on the radar, if anything, like this weird one-off thing that happened on some show and then never really mentioned again, right? He wasn't a big hero. He wasn't like a huge citywide hero at this point. So all this leads Peter to confront J. Jonah Jameson, basically threaten him and hang him out a window and says, you know what? You want me to be a menace? I'll fucking kill you. I'll kill you right now. Right? I'll throw your ass out this fucking window and I will murder the shit out of you. I will murder you to death. And this breaks the heart, the icy cold heart of J. Jonah Jameson is broken. And he admits to himself that he just misses John. And that's why he's been focusing his anger on Spider-Man. And, you know, so he's better. In this universe, J. Jonah Jameson doesn't hate Spider-Man anymore because Spider-Man threatened to kill him. Out of character. Again, this is completely out of character for JJ, right? In all universes, when Spider-Man has ever done anything like this, right? He's been really frustrated with J. Jonah Jameson, whether it's hiring the Scorpion or the Spider Killers, the Spider Slayers, or whatever it is. You know, he's always said, hey, Jonah, stop being a dick. And Jonah has never stopped, right? He's always hated Spider-Man. He always will hate Spider-Man. And again, in the mythos of Spider-Man, in the Spider-Man mythos, J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man because he hates costume heroes. He hates people who hide their face. And that goes back to when J. Jonah Jameson was working as a investigative journalist, and he was putting himself on the line every day to expose criminals and stuff. And he had run-ins with other criminals and criminal organizations that wanted to kill him, but he never had to hide his face, right? Because he was willing to put himself on the line in order to get the story out there. And that's part of the reason why he hates Spider-Man, because he feels Spider-Man is getting to be a hero without having to get the exposure of who he really is, right? And so that's part of why J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man. And so this whole thing is like Ed Brubaker doesn't understand the mythos of Spider-Man. He doesn't understand the history and everything. He's just kind of sweeping all that aside in order to tell the story that he wants to tell. So then we find out that Peter is now cutting loose. He's now being a little more aggressive because he feels good for what he did. He feels good for threatening J. Jonah Jameson. But unfortunately, Peter cuts loose in his Peter identity, and that lands him in juvie. He goes to juvie, and just wouldn't you know it, Flash Thompson and Harry Osborn are also in juvie. So apparently they harass Pete. You know, we need Pete to be harassed by bullies. So, hey, let's put the bullies into juvie with Peter, right? Because that makes sense. So, you know, eventually Harry gets out because, you know, his dad's rich, pulls some strings, Harry gets out, but Flash is still in there, and Flash is bullying Peter in juvie. Again, makes no sense. Even in the story that they're telling, it makes no sense because Peter is in this story is supposed to be really bitter about what's going on. He cuts loose. He goes after J. Jonah. He stands up for himself. He's feeling better. He gets into juvie because he's cutting loose. And then in juvie, he reverts back to being the nerd that gets picked on. Like, it would make more sense if the story was like, hey, in juvie, they try to pick on him, but then Peter beats the shit out of fucking Flash Thompson and puts him in his place, right? Because that's the story that they're telling. That's the direction they were going. But then suddenly we get a 180 and Peter's back to being a nerd who doesn't want to cut loose, who doesn't want to cause waves. Again, the writer's just all over the place with this. This leads to Peter escaping. Peter, again, he just escapes. He decides, fuck it. I don't want to be bullied. So he leaves juvie. He escapes. And now he's Spider-Man for hire. So apparently, in New York City, apparently they're offering rewards for like the capture of say Doc Ock, Lizard, or Vulture, right? So Peter now becoming Spider-Man in order to fight these villains in order to get money for their capture. So essentially he's like bounty hunting as Spider-Man. And Again, some of these things don't make sense, like the Doc Ock, Vulture, Lizard. I'm guessing they're condensing the timeline. They're moving things around because some of these events should have happened already. Some of these characters would have been dealt with by the Avengers or other people since Spider-Man wasn't around. But, in order to make the story work, actually, they just appear when Peter needs them to appear, and now Spider-Man takes them down. He fights the Green Goblin, as you can see, and he kills him on accident. In this reality, the Green Goblin is accidentally killed. Peter realizes, wait a minute, this isn't all fun and games after all. Some of these people are crazy. He kills a guy. The Green Goblin kills a guy. So Peter doesn't hold back, and in not holding back, he accidentally murders the shit out of the Green Goblin. And so now the world knows that Norman Osborn was the Green Goblin, and he got the shit murdered out of him by Spider-Man. So Spider-Man is a menace. And so Spider-Man decides, well, fuck it. If I'm a menace, if the Green Goblin and people like that exist and they can go out and do whatever they want, I got power. I should be able to do whatever I want. And so he decides he's going to break Uncle Ben out of prison. And in breaking Uncle Ben out of prison, he basically tells him, hey, it's my fault. It's my fault that Aunt May's dead. It's my fault that all this shit happened. I'm sorry. And Uncle Ben breaks down and tells him, no, it's not your fault. I should have been there. I should have protected Aunt May. And, you shouldn't hold this guilt around with you. And if you want to live up to, your aunt's expectations, what she had for you, go back to school, live your life right. Don't worry about your old Uncle Ben here in prison. Get yourself right. Get yourself right with God, right? And this panel, this series of panels is fucking ridiculous because it reminds me of Super Killer because everybody, Pete's got his mouth open. He's yelling. He's being emotional. And then in the next panel, his mouth is still open as he's crying. And then the third panel, his mouth's still open. It's like, man, he's got the Super Killer open mouth syndrome. Caught that disease. And then the story ends. Peter does go back to school. He finishes school. He meets Mary Jane. Says, so that's what happens then. He listens to Uncle Ben and starts to heal inside. He moves in with Mary Jane's aunt and finishes high school with honors. He moves in with Mary Jane's aunt. So now, suddenly, the aunt who wasn't there to help Peter after Aunt May died and Uncle Ben went to jail, suddenly she's like, yeah, Pete, you can move in with me. Why didn't you just ask like a year ago or 2 years ago? He gets to go back to school, finishes high school with honors, goes off to Empire State University on a science scholarship. He's met MJ while living with her aunt, and he hit the jackpot. So now he's dating MJ again. But again, without Peter being there, MJ was dating Harry Osborn. She breaks up with Harry. Peter's there to help her during her drug addiction. Do we just forget that Mary Jane was addicted to fucking drugs? Also, apparently Gwen Stacy doesn't exist in this universe because she wouldn't have died because the Green Goblin's dead. So Peter should have ended up with Gwen Stacy at the end of this story and not Mary Jane, right? Mary Jane should be in drug rehab or something. Also, how does he go to school? He escaped juvie. Did we just forget the fact that he was in a juvenile detention center? That means he committed a crime. They sent him to juvenile prison. He escaped. He would have, if he went back to school, that means it was like, wait a minute, Peter, you're supposed to be in juvie. They would have arrested him. He would have had to go back to juvie, finish his sentence. He wouldn't have been able to go back to high school because he already dropped out, right? You can't just go back. You can't just walk back into high school, guys. Especially not after being arrested, going to juvie, spending time there, having to go back to juvie. It would be like another 2 or 3 years at minimum, right? Maximum, because he would have to finish off his original sentence and then the new sentence for escaping and whatever other stuff they tack on during the escape attempt, right? But apparently we're not going to pretend. We're going to pretend like that didn't happen. And he becomes living his best life. And he goes, okay, sure, but what about Spider-Man? What's he doing at Spidey? He says Spider-Man isn't seen too much for those years. Occasionally, something big comes along that only he can handle, and he goes for it. But he's really focused on being a person that would make his aunt and uncle proud of him, at least until Uncle Ben gets paroled. So in this universe, while he's in college, he only becomes Spider-Man when it's like really, really important, right? He's not out there fighting crime every day, but like the big stuff, the Electros, the fucking Sandmans and stuff. That's when Peter's Spider-Man. until Uncle Ben gets out of prison. And when Uncle Ben gets out of prison, Uncle Ben becomes the man in the chair. That's right. Uncle Ben drives around in his car in order to help Peter find crimes. In order to help Peter find crimes, Uncle Ben drives around and, he's listening to the police scanner and feeds locations of, hey, there's a crime on 53rd Street. Go, Peter, go. And he's basically Peter's Ned from the Spider-Man No Way Home, right? Or Homecoming. That's when he's in the man in the chair, right? In Homecoming. So, yeah. Overall, this story is retarded. It is 100% dumb. Again, I don't know if Ed Brubaker is not familiar with the Spider-Man mythos, if he just doesn't care, if he just, I just wanted to write a story. And this isn't the first time. What's funny is they actually did a what if way back in the gap, right? So that's from 2004. What if Aunt May had died instead of Uncle Ben? But way back in the gap, in 1984, there was actually a what if. It was what if, what if Spider-Man's Uncle Ben had lived? So it is still essentially the same story. Aunt May dies instead of Uncle Ben, right? No, I was wrong. So let me correct something real quick. So in this story, Uncle Ben went out for milk. In the original, which is what I was thinking of, that's the one that Uncle Ben had the sciatica, that he went downstairs. He didn't go downstairs. Instead, Aunt May went. So in the original, what if Spider-Man's Uncle Ben had lived from 1984? That's where Uncle Ben's asleep. So Aunt May goes downstairs, gets shot by the burglar. And in this version, Peter lives a normal life because Uncle Ben is cooler than Aunt May. He actually lives a better life because instead of having to worry about sickly old Aunt May, Uncle Ben can take care of himself. So Peter invariably is a lot more lax in his comings and goings. Uncle Ben figures out he's Spider-Man. But hey, Uncle Ben's like, it's cool, it's fine, you're Spider-Man. Hey, go save the city, we're cool. Uncle Ben actually confronts Flash Thompson and tells him to stop fucking with Peter, right? So essentially, in the original version of the story, Peter's life is way better because Uncle Ben lives instead of Aunt May. And in the new story, Peter's life is a lot shittier because Aunt May dies instead of Uncle Ben, right? And I don't know if this is like the correct what happened in the past, if they're like, if he's familiar, if Ed Brubaker was familiar with the original story, which is written by Peter Gillis, right? If that's why they're like, hey, in the original story, this happened, so you got to make it different. Why they would do two what ifs, which is the exact same premise, I don't know. But yeah, I think this story, it fails. It fails on a fundamental level, right? It doesn't really know who Spider-Man is. It doesn't really know how Peter is as a person, right? He is who they need him to be in every scene. Instead of being Peter, instead of him actually being Peter, someone who grew up with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, was taught responsibility, was a nerdy kid, instead he's like, oh man, now he's bitter. Oh man, now he's mean. Oh man, now he's a nerd again. Oh man, now he's bitter again. Oh man, now he's cutting loose. It's like just going through like this roller coaster ride of who he is and his personality. And I think that really is a detriment to the story. And again, there's no focus. They kind of want to go through like the entire Spider-Man career, like, right? So it's like it goes by really fast as far as like time frames, right? It doesn't really focus. Like it does go, okay, we're going to show you how Peter's life is inside the foster care system, right? And then like a little wrap up, right? And then years later, Peter became Spider-Man and blah, blah, blah. No, it's like, we're going to show you boom, 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 event, until boom. Now Uncle Ben's out and he's living a good life, right? I think they should have slowed down, focused on maybe his first major villain or his first attempts at being Spider-Man post Aunt May's death and how that went, and told a more intimate story, a more tightly crafted story about Spider-Man and how Aunt May's death affects him versus how Uncle Ben's death would have affected him, right? I think that would have been a better story. And then you could, like I said, you could have ended up with like an epilogue and, this is how he ends up different. This one, I wouldn't recommend it. Not good at all. But I mean, it's a thing. The original version, the 1984, what if Spider-Man's Uncle Ben had lived? That's a much better story, and they actually seem to care about Spider-Man. And I guess because it's from the 80s, they were okay with Uncle Ben being a better role model than Aunt May, right? We didn't have to do the whole like, oh, it's Aunt May's what shaped him and what made him to be the man he was. No, it's like, hey, Here's reality. He grew up with a loving uncle and aunt, and now without the sickly aunt in the way, Peter can go ahead and live a life that's a lot freer. You know, he doesn't have to worry about paying bills. He doesn't have to worry about, taking care of the aunt or being there, or she's going to have a heart attack, or protecting her from reality, right? It's Uncle Ben, and Uncle Ben is cool, and he's healthy. So the idea that Uncle Ben would have just like confessed, and again, that's the other weird thing, right? Like Uncle Ben and Peter, they don't like try to prove that he didn't murder the guy. Uncle Ben just confesses to a murder that he didn't commit. He could just be like, I came here to confront him, and the guy tripped and fell out the window, right? Like he could have said that and maybe got like a lenient sentence or something, right? But he just goes, no, I murdered that guy. I was mad because he killed my wife, and I came here and I murdered that guy. And then you go, oh, okay, put you in jail. It's so ridiculous. I mean, what would have been a good premise is if he got locked up and then like got murdered in jail, right? That could have been something. You could have did something with that, or you could have had, like I said, Peter gets adopted by Harry. Harry's dad, Norman. He gets adopted by Norman, raised as Harry's brother for a couple of years, takes over the business, right? Because he's better at science and everything. So Norman starts grooming Peter to take over, and then Harry becomes the Green Goblin out of revenge, right? And so then there's like a brother dynamic between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, and Spider-Man doesn't want to turn in the Green Goblin because he's Harry and he knows he's Harry, right? And just, you could have did something with that and played with that or something, right? Or even like growing up with Aunt Anna, and then he doesn't want to marry MJ, or doesn't want to date her because now that's his sister, right? It's his stepsister, or whatever you want to call it. So that's like a weird thing. So he ends up with Gwen, but he helps MJ not be a druggie. So then she goes off with marries Harry, and they have a normal life, and everything's nice that way. But this was just like, no, we got to get him back to where him and Mary Jane are together at the end, and Uncle Ben's now helping him be Spider-Man, which makes no sense because he doesn't need Uncle Ben. He doesn't need a guy driving around with a walkie-talkie going, "Hey, there's a crime." Like he could just put a walkie-talkie on his costume and just hear it himself, right? He doesn't need Uncle Ben to tell him. Like Uncle Ben, like covering for him or making excuses, or hey, Uncle Ben is the one who turns in the photos, right? To pretend like it's his photos instead of Peter's photos, right? Or Peter's still on the run. Uncle Ben gets out of prison. Peter's still on the run because he's still wanted. So Uncle Ben protects him that way. And, Peter doesn't get to live a normal life, but he still gets to be Spider-Man, right? And Uncle Ben still gets to have Peter, right? Because he's hiding him in his house. Something like that. But, man, this just dropped the ball. This was just terrible. Terrible.